Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. Today we're going to keep reading the book al-Ajwabah al-Jaliyah fi al-Ahkam al-Hanbaliya, or the clear answer in the Hanbali Rulings by Sheikh Musa bin Issa al-Qaddoomi rahimahullah. And in this lesson, inshallah, we'll be talking about the Sunna actions of the prayer and the prayer of the woman. So let us begin. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Allahumma anfa'na bima 'allamtana wa 'allamna bima yanfa'una wa zidna ilman ya Rabbil Alameen. قال المؤلف rahimahullah نفع الله به وبعلومه وعلوم مشايخنا في الدارين آمين. So, just as a reminder, we are reading from the translation of a Sheikh Khalid Shah, and we are now on page number 71. And the author, he says, number 58. What are the verbal sunnas of salat, or the prayer? And before we answer that question, maybe just to clarify the definition of a sunnah, and sunnah is the singular word, the plural form is sunan. So the sunnah is something that does not render the prayer invalid if it is abandoned or left out, even if done so intentionally. For the one who leaves it out, it is permissible to do a prostration of forgetfulness, but that is not wajib or obligatory, nor is it mustahab or preferred. And as you will see, the author, much like in the main book that he's summarizing, Dalil al-Talib, he is going to divide these sunnahs into the verbal and the actions, physical actions. So let us start with the verbal. As he said, what are the verbal sunnahs of salah? Some of the verbal sunnahs of salah are: A, the opening dua. So this opening dua would be said after the takbirat al-ihram, and the wording of this dua is subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik wa tabarak ismuk wa ta'ala jadduk وَلَا إِلَهَ غَيْرُكَ, meaning, glory and praise be to you, Allah. Blessed be your name, and exalted be your majesty. There is none worthy of worship except you. The author goes on, B, ta'awud. And the ta'awud is seeking refuge, and that means from shaitan rajim, the accursed shaitan. And one will say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, and this will be said before the Basmala, or saying Bismillah. And the author continues, C, saying Basmala, or saying the Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And this refers to both at the beginning of Surah Al-Fatiha and at the beginning of every surah that has it, in every rak'ah. And every surah begins with the Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, the Basmalah, except for Surah Al-Bara. And the author continues, D, saying ameen after Al-Fatiha, and then E, reciting a surah after Al-Fatiha. Now, according to our madhab, one would read from the Mufassalat, or these are the surahs starting from Surah Qaf to the end of the Quran. However, there are different recommended recitations for the different prayers. So maybe just to put this another way, from a very technical fiqhi perspective, if one wants to be imam and pray the 5 daily prayers, one needs to know from Surah Al-Qaf to the end. This is what is the Sunnah to be read in the prayer. Doesn't mean don't try to read more, especially, or to memorize more, especially if you're an imam, but from a technical fiqh perspective, we just need from Qaf to the end. So regarding Surah Al-Fajr, it is recommended to read from Tiwal al-Mufassal, or the long of the Mufassal surahs, and this is from Surah 50 to 77, or Surah Qaf to Al-Mursalat. Then for Surah Al-Maghrib, it is recommended to read from the Qisar, and the Qisar are from Surah 93 to the end, which the last surah is number 114, and this is from Surah Ad-Duha to An-Nas. For the other 3 prayers, it is recommended to read from the Al-Awsat, or the middle length surahs, and this is from Surah 78 to 92, or Surah An-Naba until Surah Al-Layl. Then the author goes on, F, for the imam to recite audibly in the appropriate places. Doing so is makruh, or disliked, for a follower, but an individual worshipper, so one who is praying by himself, can choose. And this means, for the prayer where we do not recite out loud, no one recites out loud regardless he's by himself or leading a congregation. But for the one who is praying by himself, one of the audible prayers, he can choose to recite it audibly or silently. And as we said, silently doesn't mean without any sound, but in a way that one just hears himself, and Allah knows best. And then G, the author goes on, imam or an individual worshipper can say after tamheed, and this is the statement Rabbana wa lakal hamd, when rising from the ruku', there is another dua or supplication, which is mil as-samawati wa mil al-ardi wa mil ma shi'ta min shay'in ba'du, or that which would fill the heavens and the earth, that which is between them, and that which will please you besides them. And the author goes on, H, tasbih of ruku' and sajda, and saying Rabb aghfirli, to be done more than once. So the tasbih of ruku', if you remember, is Subhan Rabbi al-Azim, and then for the sujood, Subhan Rabbi al-Ala, and then between the 2 sittings, Rabb aghfirli. So it is sunnah that they be done more than once. And saying those each 3 times is what's recommended. The author goes on, I, salat on the Prophet's family in the last tashahhud. So this is an interesting point. Maybe I think some other madhab might have this included in the wajibat, or the obligatory acts, if I remember correctly, but according to our madhab, one only says this salat on the Prophet's family in the last tashahhud. Meaning, if you have two tashahhud, like if it's a 3 or 4 rak'ah prayer, the first tashahhud, you only read the tashahhud without the prayer on the Prophet's family, sallallahu, and then in the last tashahhud, you would then recite that salat on the Prophet's family, sallallahu. And the author goes on J, asking barakah for them as well. And these two would be like, and I should just mention, I mean, you might find some slight variation in different narrations, but what you can read is Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama sallaita ala ali Ibrahima innaka Hamidum Majid wa barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama barakta ala ali Ibrahima innaka Hamidum Majid. And the author goes on K, dua after the last tashahhud, and this is the dua or supplication that is read as A'udhu billahi min adhabi jahannama wa min adhabi al-qabri wa min fitnati al-mahya wal-mamat wa min fitnati al-masih ad-dajjal, meaning, I seek refuge in Allah from the torment of the hellfire, from the torment of the grave, from the trial of life and death, and from the evil of the trial of the Antichrist. Now the author continues, number 59, what are the Sunnah actions in Salat? And he replies, there are many. They are also called hay'at, in parentheses, the plural of hay'ah. Al-Buhuti mentions in his Sharh al-Muntaha that the author of al-Mustaw'ib, meaning a summary, and others have named them the hay'at. And At-Taghlibi mentions in his Sharh of al-Dalil that they are in total 45 actions, and this is the same number that is mentioned in Muntaha al-Iradat. So the author goes on, these are the hay'at. A, raising hands with the opening takbir. So the hands should be raised, fingers outstretched, put them together, not apart. The tips of the finger should reach the shoulder. Can be just slightly above it so that you're actually reaching the shoulder. Some of the older books, such as Al-Umdah by Shaykh al-Islam ibn Qudama, mention you can also go up to the lobes of the ears, but what all the later scholars mention is going to the shoulders. And this just highlights one of the important points to study fiqh correctly, meaning referring to the books of the later scholars, because I mean, this is maybe a basic issue. It doesn't have a major impact, but you might see, for example, that the list of the fard actions for some things could be different. So if you are referring to one of the older books that is maybe not having the final fatwa opinion, you could be giving an incorrect fatwa. So please, let's study books according to the way that our scholars have taught us, and this means referring to the later period books, particularly what are based on Al-Muntaha and Al-Iqna'. Okay, the author continues. B, raising hands when going for ruku', and C, raising hands rising up from ruku', So sometimes I've observed people that they're not maybe raising their hands in one of these two spots, but they're only doing one of the two, which as far as I know isn't a position in any madhab. So please make sure raise the hands when going in and coming out of the ruku'. The author goes on, D, placing the right hand over the left hand under the navel when reciting. And Shaykhana Dr. Mustafa, he said, when you're putting the hand under the navel, we don't hang it so far down like you see some of the Hanafis doing. It's just right under the navel. And I know this is a bit of a hot issue in fiqh, but this is the madhab position. And this is what the fatwa that Imam Ahmed radiallahu anhu gave. That should be sufficient for you. The author goes on, E, look at the place of the sajda or prostration. So when you're in the prayer, you should be looking down at that place of prostration. F, pray a short salat if one is the imam. Meaning, so if you're leading other people, you don't want to pray such an overly long prayer. Once again, according to the guidance of what one should read. And the meaning for this is that there could be elderly or sick people. We don't want to burden them, so the imam should keep the prayer within its recommended length. The author goes on, G, make the first rak'ah longer than the second. H, have a gap of 1 handspan between the feet while standing. So don't stand with your feet and legs together. There should at least be a small gap there. Then he goes on, I, grasping the knees during ruku'. J, head is straight with back in parentheses during ruku'. So I think we talked about this already, but you'll be kind of at like a 90-degree angle with your legs and your back and your head. He goes on, K, have the arms away from the sides and belly from the thighs. So have some gap between the arms from the side and the stomach from the thighs. This is in the prostration, and arms away from the thighs or from the sides refers to both in the ruku' and in the sujood. Just a quick thing to mention here. I've seen or experienced many times in the masjid in prayer, people are a bit over enthusiastic to follow the sunnah, and please be aware of those among you, around you. You can't be crowding people by doing this. So the main point is that you don't have your arms stuck to your sides, but you don't need to exaggerate it, particularly if you're in a line of prayer. You can't be compressing people next to you. And if you really want to do that, then make sure you really have your feet spread out and you have sufficient space. But please, when you implement these sunnas and the different acts of prayer, one implements them with common sense. Barakallahu fikum. The author goes on, L, to have a gap between the knees. This means in the sujood or prostration. He goes on, M, have the hands up to the shoulders during sujood. So when you're in making the sujood, your hand should be in line with your shoulders, not up by your head or not tucked in closer to your ribs or stomach. It should be in line with the shoulders. He goes on, N, place the hands on the thighs when sitting between the sajdas and in tashahhud, with the hands stretched out and the fingers joined together. So you keep the hands similar to like you do when you're raising the arms in the takbir. And the last one, he goes on, O, to clasp the small finger and the ring finger on the right hand, and to make a ring of the thumb and middle finger, and to point with the index finger whenever the name of Allah is mentioned. So you will be making this ring with the middle finger and the thumb, and we're talking about the right hand when it's on the thigh. The pinky and the ring finger of the right hand will be tucked in. You're making this ring with the middle finger and thumb, and then you're keeping the pointer finger kind of aligned with the ring, except for when you say Allah, and this means specifically Allah. So in the tashahhud, if you read it as we've mentioned it earlier, and as you see it in all of the fiqh books, you should be saying Allah 4 times, meaning you're going to point only 4 times. And the salat, the prayer on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we do not point at that time, because there's some confusion about the word Allahumma. Yes, this is a word that is having the meaning of Allah. It's as if one is calling to Allah, but it is not the lafz al-jalala or the majestic word, which is Allah. So only when we say Allah do we point, which will be 4 times in the tashahhud. And the author concludes, there are more details of these and other sunnahs in larger texts, and this is correct. If we refer to Dalil al-Talib with the Sharh of al-Taghlibi, we can mention a few other maybe important things that weren't mentioned here, but it is also a sunnah to make the takbir al-ihram, takbirat al-ihram, with an audible voice, regardless if the prayer itself is audible or silent. And when we mentioned grabbing the knees during the ruku', it is also a sunnah that one grabs in such a way that the fingers are kind of separated. It is also sunnah that when one goes down for the sujood, that he go on his knees first, meaning before the hands. This is if it's possible. I know some people have, for age or other reasons, injury, maybe they have to do hands first, but the sunnah, if you're able to do it, is to do the knees before the hands. And the actual order, which is sunnah, would be going down on the knees, and then the 2 hands, and then the forehead, and then the nose. And I think we already mentioned in the sujood, keeping the arms or elbows a bit off of the sides. The important thing that they're not on the side, and to keep the stomach away from the thighs when in prostration. I think we've mentioned this one. Then there are some sunnahs of the sitting. I think we have discussed the sitting before, but hopefully in this dars you will be seeing on the screen the example. But one should sit in the iftirash style between the 2 prostrations. So this is your kind of sitting on the left foot with the toes of the right foot on the ground and the foot kind of upright. Then one would also sit in the same style for the first tashahhud, assuming that you have 2 tashahhud, or even if it's only 1, but okay, we can put it that way. In the first tashahhud, regardless, you would sit iftirash, and if you have a second tashahhud, you would then sit tawarak. So we said this is a bit similar to the iftirash, but it's as if you slide the foot out underneath the area of the right foot and the right shin, and you're then kind of leaning or sitting on the left buttocks. And then there are some important points related to the salam or the assalamu alaikum at the end of the prayer. One would actually want to start by the salam when facing the qibla. And then for the first one, after you start facing the qibla, you will then turn to the right, like when you're saying it. And then for the second one, you turn your face to the left. And it is a sunnah to, at this point, have a niyyah or an intention to leave the prayer when you're doing it. This is a sunnah. Don't worry if you forget about it, but this is the sunnah. And finally, it's also a sunnah that one exaggerate the second turning, meaning to the left side, a little bit more than the right. So when you're turning for the assalamu alaikum, you turn for the right, and you can turn a little bit more for the left. Allah knows best. Now this concludes with what we're reading from the book today. I did want to add a brief section about the prayer of the woman, meaning how that prayer differentiates from the prayer of the man. So even the fiqh books, they usually don't have this as its own section, but we see this question coming up so much, I thought I will just put a few of the main points here. So regarding what I've already mentioned, inshallah, if you're a female or you're teaching a female, please make note of these points. When it comes to standing in the prayer, the woman will hold her hands in the same place as a man, meaning under the belly button. There are some people think that the woman has to be up higher or something, but no, she holds her hands in the same place. As for things that are different, there are basically like 3 things that are different from the prayer of the woman, from the prayer of the man. The first is that she would keep her hands or arms closer to her sides in the ruku' and the sujood. So we talked about this before. For the man, it is sunnah that he be out a little bit more, but she should have her hands and arms closer into her. Likewise, when she's doing the sujood, it is better that her stomach come closer to her thighs. And third, she should sit in a more closed manner. So I believe what Ibn Qudama rahimahullah has mentioned in al-Mughni, that either she can sit cross-legged or she can sit in a way that it's similar to the tawarak, but one would put the foot down. I believe this is what he has mentioned. But the main point is that she should be sitting in kind of a more closed manner than the man. So you can see with these 3 things that are different, the woman is making her body a little bit more closed than what a man would do. And this is regardless of she's praying by herself or in front of people, whatever. This is just applying all the time. I've already mentioned al-Mughni. One can look at al-Mughni for more details on this. Barakallahu fikum. Let's end here before we go on, inshallah, the next dars, talking about the Sujood Sahu, or the prostration of forgetfulness. As always, don't forget our brothers and sisters in your dua, and our scholars, those of the Darain, this life and the next, and al-Faqir. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.